I'll talk about the application of the scientific method to life. And this has been used extensively in a lot of different fields. And the reason why I want to talk about that is I've had, a sort of back injury, I guess, and I was just going to see a physiotherapist about it, and they're applying the scientific method to sort of target progress with it. And it's pretty interesting. It's actually pretty fascinating because I've had this injury for 5 years. I wish I could tell a story like I got it from wrestling a bear or something like that, but actually it was just from bending over to pick some weeds in the backyard after sitting for a long time. The academic profession is not conducive to exercise, so you really need to work on those things, and so I've been very careful since then. But for 5 years it's been working on I had a numb foot for a year and a half, probably 2 years, completely numb, and it's been coming back, and it came some symptoms, some pain symptoms have sort of reappeared in a different location, and I started to go back to the physiotherapist. I went to a doctor, and they got me to go to a physiotherapist, and they've been applying the scientific method on it, and it's actually been pretty miraculous. We had sort of this insight today of bending in a certain way, and I've got a huge range of mobility just from doing that, which I never had in 5 years. And so I want to actually talk about the application of scientific method after that, because I think it's an interesting insight, an interesting problem that we have in terms of figuring out, okay, what is the right method? What should we do to actually solve something? And that's really all the scientific method is. You hear about science and people get all up in airs about it, but it's really just a systematic way of solving a problem. And it's evolved to be pretty, it's actually kind of boring. It's a step-by-step process with it, and I'm going to talk about that in this episode. So if you don't know me, I'm Professor Dave Masnick. I'm Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship. I created this whole Reciprocity project to give back. So many people helped me out that I wanted to pay the favor forward to help you out. So the scientific method has been applied to many different areas. A lot of people falsely assume that the scientific method is only for science, but it has been growing in its impact slowly in many different domains as a sort of reasoned way to do adaptation, right? So focusing on, or a rational way to do adaptation and discovery, which tends to be very difficult, because the default that we sort of do adaptation, we kind of do a little bit of a what they call is a Bayesian rational approach, but it's really just kind of we try things and we see if it works, and if it works, then we continue to pursue those things. So there's randomness in what you're trying, and then you do this little bit of a trial and error approach, and that is pretty universal across people, human beings. I guess those are the same. That's how we think that adaptation happens, right? Or how evolutionary things happen. Doesn't mean that there is a right answer. That's the thing that people falsely assume. We don't really it's impossible to know what the right answer is in the world, right? That sort of definitive, this is what sort of is valid, valid knowledge. That's really hard to figure out, and I would never really know, but we know when something is better, or something moves us in a certain direction, and that's what the scientific method does, right? So you do sort of simplest experimentation scientific method approach is that you have a hypothesis that you write down, and then you and then you test that hypothesis, usually with there's all sorts of different approaches, right? There's lots of different research methodologies that you can use, but the classic one that we know about is sort of the A/B type framework, where you try one thing and then you have a control on another thing, and you continuously kind of add it, see what's going on, and then you see what the results are, and then you write those particular results down, and then you iterate from there, right? So you see which one of the A/B type approaches that you do, which the case, or sometimes called case control, that if you try whatever you're thinking about, you try it, you see what happens, and if it does a little bit better, then you repeat that thing, and if it doesn't, then you go back to the control and come up with a different sort of solution or approach, and you continuously adapt that way. And this approach is sort of systematic. It's more of a systematic approach. It's more of and there's not a lot to it. It's just a systematic approach, and it's been implementing a lot, right? It's been implemented across a lot of different areas, and I think the person that was probably wildly in charge of thinking about this sort of evolutionary approach was Charles Darwin, back in the day, of sort of identifying that we do adapt over time, and that has been imprinted within the scientific. And then there was Fisher, and after that sort of had this idea of doing controlled experiments, and it has grown in influence, and what we understand as science today is totally different than what it was many years ago. But the scientific method has evolved into this very simple approach, and so where it's taken off, back in the early last century, the scientific management by Frederick Taylor was probably the first one to use scientific approaches outside of science per se, and use it, apply it, and that was the whole field, basically the whole field of management science evolved from that, and was started from that because of this sort of, they call it Taylorism, this approach to management, and doing controlled experiments or controlled approaches, looking to see what happens with with people, with like productivity, and that's the ultimate goal in this approach, is productivity in scientific management. And it's been in existence for a long time, and I rail back against it a lot on this podcast and all that kind of stuff. But by the way, if you don't know, I'm on like all socials. I started out on YouTube, so there's lots of stuff on YouTube if you want to check it out. But now it's evolved into I haven't seen it so much yet, but nutrition approaches definitely should be using it. But physiotherapy is using it at this moment. I've seen it in the startup world. And software, that's actually where a lot of great influence now, where people sort of being very interested in this approach is came out of. That's why I started the Reciprocity Project, was getting access to that ability and allowing people to use it. So it is growing in influence in many different areas, and there's still a lot of different areas that are not being touched and not being approached. There's still some sort of quote unquote scientific approaches, but they're not really scientific approaches, I wouldn't say, in religion and different areas like that. But what you're looking for is areas where we can identify when there is an outcome that's better. So, like as I mentioned, nutrition definitely can use the scientific process that it is used in. It's used in science, right, to understand how nutrition actually works. But you don't see sort of a lot of diets that are using this kind of method. It's not sort of explicit just yet in popular culture. But, there's all sorts of domains where we know that there is an answer that's a little better, and we want to pursue that thing, or we want to identify that thing, and sort of incrementally, and there's a lot of incremental gains with this. Sometimes there's a leap and bound, but most of the time it's pretty incremental, where it's just one thing after the other, and you're slightly improving over time. And it might be in the sense of, applying the scientific method to, family life. There's been, home economics was a big push that was actually spun out of Taylorism, the scientific management approach. But, lots of people can use this to think about how the relationships can improve, right? Let's try this, let's try that. Seeing what sort of happens. You kind of see that, I guess, with some therapy and some people sort of using this approach, but it's less, explicit. What else is there that your relationships? You got religion. You have, what else is major parts of work? I talked about that. There's a lot of domains where it is evolved and it's growing and it's increasing in importance. And the reason is just simply because it's a systematic approach, and it allows you to sort of understand, what to do next. Well, that's false. That's the one downfall. With the scientific method, it doesn't allow you to know what to do next. Actually, that's where theory comes in, and sort of understanding, the world, or looking to see what we have done in the past to understand what to do next, or having some educated, approximation of what would make sense next, given the context that you're in. So you need to, you notice I was hesitant to say educated guess, because I don't like that term. It's not really a guess. So what I'm getting at here is that the scientific method has a tremendous amount of impact, and really it's less about, the impact is less about that this is some sort of ideological approach or something like that, right? Which is what people assume with science, that there is a scientist and a scientist knows everything. That's not it at all. Anybody that's in science is just hey, we don't know, right? That is the presumption. It's the complete opposite of the sort of doctrine approach. And in fact, it's more of it's systematically admitting you don't know, and it's hard to know, and then coming up with an approach that you can sort of control what you know and you don't know. And that is more of what science and the scientific method is about. And so I think it's going to grow in influence unless we get a different approach. But the scientific method is very... it's very versatile, I guess. It's more, and people get that confused, right? Because you can use all sorts of different research methods to address science and what you're looking at. But it's really this kind of controlled guessing. And if we come up with something better than that, which I don't think that's ever going to happen, I think it's going to be improved upon, right? That is the fundamental thing. That's why science is such a beautiful method, or it's such a beautiful approach, is that whenever there is a problem with it, it absorbs it and it says, hey, crap, this is a problem, we need to change this, we need to address it, and it adapts from there. And I think that's a beautiful thing. People are incredibly smart and open to new approaches with it. So the scientific method is going to be, it's going to look different, I think, 30 years from now, that sort of approach that everybody uses. But, how different, I don't know. I'm not expecting it to be dramatically different, but I suspect it'll be different than what we do now. So, with that, hopefully you learned something. It was a great a great sort of topic to talk about, I think, because I think we're moving in a lot of different directions in sort of exploiting the scientific method. Now, to get into the backlash of it and all that kind of stuff, that's a topic for another discussion or another day. But really, I think what that is, in my personal view, is people are nervous about getting, an improved answer, so they don't want to go there, and then they have pushback. And they sort of really rail against that, or there's like ideologies and stuff that are interfering with the process. So anyways, hopefully you like this, and leave a comment on the pod if you do. Yeah, I do appreciate it. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.